First, I want you to meet one of our Torrens University alumni. From high school dropout to spending a period of time homeless, fast forward to those mentioned life-changing 4 days in a mental health ward. So now a Bachelor of Business graduate who is constantly challenging and battling his demons, but does so in such a generous and compassionate and open way. Paul Grainger is really someone who is an exceptional storyteller, but also a fierce and proud advocate when it comes to mental health, well-being and awareness. He's very open about his story, which is interwoven with frequent tales of anxiety and depression, but is also bound to hope and, most importantly, resilience. His story is one that resonates with many, including me, and one that may be surprising considering the first part of his introduction. So let's meet Paul at our Love Your Story, Love Our Story event, which happened last year in Sydney, and then get Paul onto the Racket.
I was now 23, I was living in Sydney, and still I was asking myself the same bloody question. What is my life worth? What is the point of these continued struggles? And frankly, why does anyone give a shit? This time it felt very different to that dark night 7 years earlier. This time I'd tried to beat this and it felt like it had beaten me. It felt like now there was one option left. I got in my car, not knowing where I was going, somewhere away, I didn't know. But I ended up at the Prince of Wales Emergency Department in Randwick. I parked in a 1 hour zone and I wouldn't leave for 4 days. How had it come to this? How? Because I was still telling myself the same bullshit stories. Under this veil of success and dreams and adventure, I would still look at myself in the mirror and ask, am I worthy? Am I good enough? And I could never seem to find many or any reasons to suggest that I was.
Paul, how are you doing?
I am very well, Bryce. It's so great to be a part of this event. Good to see you again as well.
Tell me, like the last couple of months, I don't even know how to put them into words, but can you be more eloquent? How have the last couple of months been?
It's been a huge challenge, as it has been for all of us. And I've reflected recently as to what the hardest thing about lockdown has been for me. The hardest thing I think really has been able to keep some kind of consistency. Some days it's felt okay. I felt like I'm doing good. I'm motivated. I'm connecting with friends. And then other days, I can't get out of bed, and it's that period where you're just binging Netflix and waiting for the next week to start. So for me, it's been hard to find that balance, but it's kind of taking it each day as it comes.
And you're doing all of this, and at the same time, you've been finishing your studies with us. Isn't that right?
Yeah. So it's a crazy whirlwind. Graduated from my degree, started a new job.
In the middle of lockdown.
In the middle of lockdown, yeah. So it's very contrasting emotions. There's obviously a lot of challenging things about it, but there's also some incredible opportunities. So it's been interesting juggling those competing emotions.
So in your Love Your Story, you asked, what stories are we telling ourselves? Are they healthy? Are they helping? Or are they holding us back and keeping us down? And then you explained how you began to tell a different story about yourself. So I want to ask, first of all, what was the story that you were once telling yourself? So when you go back now, years ago, and how has that story changed?
So the story I told myself for far too long was one that I wasn't good enough, a story where I wasn't worthy. And at one point I actually had, a whole heap of pages in my journals filled with things that I had failed at, things I dropped out of, friendships that I'd, ruined, relationships that I'd burned. And it was, I guess perpetuating this negative narrative. And I guess through that, I came to this crisis point and a turning point, which we'll discuss further. But, in that moment, it was realizing and having the awareness that I needed to stop, to pause, to reflect, and to realize that if I was going to, begin writing a new story, I needed to give myself a better foundation. And that was actually when I started studying. It was realizing that there were some skills and some parts to my life that I was missing, and it was slowing down and giving myself time to start writing that new story for myself. And that's been the journey that I've been on these last 4 years, really.
And were you ever kind to yourself in any of the lists, or was it always? I mean, it sounds extraordinary to hear that, Paul, that you were writing down all of the relationships that you had destroyed. Did you ever write down a positive list, or was it always?
Well, that's the thing, right?
All of the bad things.
Yeah, and I think, journaling's been a huge part of my life for the last 10, 15 years now. And what journaling does for me is it gives me the opportunity to look back and to actually examine some of the ways that I was thinking in the past. Putting it down on paper lets me look back and reflect. And there was actually a point where I looked back and I actually started seeing this negative, these negative lists, and there wasn't anything positive in there, exactly as you say. And it was that moment was actually eye-opening in itself. It was like, why am I not able to see the positives and to focus on the positives? So really, just even in that process of journaling, I was able to look back and see that, to recognize that. And now when I look back and compare what I'm writing now versus what I was writing then, it also gives me a reason to celebrate. I can see how far I've come, which is, and that perpetuates now a much, much healthier cycle moving forward.
So what do you write now?
Now I begin each day with something that I'm grateful for and something that I'm proud of, and I focus on that.
And so you do that as a daily practice. You every day you'll sit down and you'll write one thing that you're grateful for.
Yeah, grateful for, and something that I'm proud of, something that I can celebrate. And just off camera, there's a whole stack of journals from the last 10 years, and I can look at that evolution of thought, which is pretty cool.
I always, when I talk with you, I always feel, I'll be really honest about this right now. You are such a confident, good-looking human being, right? Like you are, for me, like every single, like perfume commercial I've ever watched of like, a very certain type of male physique, and like you're strikingly handsome, and also you're so well spoken and articulate. And so, I think that the other part of this is, of course, looks can be deceiving, and like behind every facade, there are other things that are happening as well. So, I mean, I wonder if you can reflect on that for a second, like, and I mean this in the sense that you do strike me that you look confident and you've got it together, but maybe that's not always the case.
It's not always the case, and I think it's a really important reminder that when we think about days like "Are You Okay" day, it's like sometimes when we're hurting and when we're feeling pain, we become very good at putting on a front, and it's more important than ever, and it's so important to check in with your friends and your family, regardless of how they might seem externally. I'm very philosophical and introspective, so I can examine myself and understand, exactly what I need. And I'm now very confident in communicating that with close friends when I might not be feeling, the best. But, I really believe that if there's any conversation that I can add value to in life, it's going to come from this place of real passion and you know, my journey with anxiety and depression and a family history of suicide. Like I know that if there's anything that I'm going to engage in, it's going to be this space. And you know, even if I might feel like I have some inner demons and some doubts, you know, I know my value now, and I can communicate that confidently in, you know, any situation.
I guess I'm also reflecting on it because I don't know about you, but I regularly feel like a fraud, particularly with my job now and the job title, and then I hear people introduce me and they sometimes read out my bio, and I always think, you know, as they're reading out my bio, I could actually write another bio. So like they'll read all of the successes, Paul, you know, like all of the massive achievements. But you know, equally, I could talk about how I've been rock bottom so many times in my life. I could talk about all of the projects that didn't work, and the relationships that went into different directions. I could talk about, you know, my own struggles in terms of like identity and who I am. But it's interesting how, like, you know, we always focus on the success. And yet it takes all of this to make us human. You know, it is, you know, you stand in front of me as someone who is well-rounded because you've actually been on a journey, and a journey is never smooth sailing, is it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I'm very proud of the things that I've been able to overcome. And, you know, when we reflect on these experiences and how they can potentially add value to our lives, you know, that's a long process to see that application. And a little, you know, something that I've done in the last few years is starting to, you know, reframe these experiences, you know, from my past or even in my present, as if I'm writing a book for my life. And I've written the last chapter of my book, and I know how the story ends, and I'm very excited by the last chapter. And I think that by reframing some of the struggles that we have during our life, it's going to make for some amazing chapters in the middle. And when this book goes to be published, it's going to be a bestseller, not for the last chapter, but for everything in between. And it's taking that process to reframe it, which has been really powerful for me.
So there was a process to reframe it. And I do think, you know that I love telling stories, and storytelling is exceptionally powerful. I do believe we become the stories we tell. Like I truly believe that.
Yeah.
But to get to that point where you could reframe, was there a moment that led to that process? Was there something that happened, or, you know, a particular moment where you went, I have to actually change gear here?
There's been a few big moments over the years where I've been challenged to do that. The first time that I felt at rock bottom was when I was 16, and that was the first time that I began to have suicidal thoughts. And in that moment, something just came over me, and I was like, whoa, like what's going on here? I need to do something. And it was in that moment where I thought that I need to give this pain a purpose in my life. I need to be able to channel that and use it to make a difference. And since then, over the last 11 years, I've been trying to figure out how to do that. And that's the healing process, and that's the learning process. And, you know, fast forward 7 years from that moment, I had another crisis moment when I was, you know, now living in Sydney, and I felt like I'd tried everything to navigate this process, and I hadn't been able to succeed. And, you know, in that moment, I felt like I had nowhere else to turn. And somehow I managed to find I don't know how I managed to find what I managed to find, but I walked into the doors of the emergency department at the hospital in Sydney, and I said, I don't know what to do. I just need some help. And, you know, these moments are just, you know, recognizing that we can't do it on our own. And the process of reaching out to these support mechanisms help with that process of reframing it and getting us back on track.
And I just want to remind people as they're watching, there are a number of websites and phone numbers. So there's Beyond Blue reframing.org.au, which is a fantastic organisation, Paul, and I know you're heavily involved in it.
Yeah.
And of course, Lifeline, which I feel like Lifeline is one of the great unsung heroes of Australian life. 13114 is the number there. Now, Paul, I do want to come to a point before that you have lived experience of suicide. So what would you like us to know about it?
What would I like you to know about suicide?
If anything.
I think, suicide is the end. If there's two things I can say about suicide, it's that firstly, if you're feeling like you just don't know where to turn, and as I mentioned, I've been in a situation where you feel like you've exhausted all of the other options and you think like this is the only option left. In that moment, there are still options. And when I walked into the door of that hospital that day, I was more terrified than ever before. And that was probably what I was most terrified of is being that vulnerable and accepting that kind of help. And I was just blown away by the love and support that I received in that department in the 4 days that I spent there. And that meant that I didn't need to be fearful of, if I do get to that moment, there's still going to be people there for me. So that's the first thing I'll say. And the second thing I'll say is that as a society and within our organization and other organizations and in schools, we really have a responsibility to educate people on mental wellness. I think often the conversation about mental health links to mental illness, but when we talk about mental health, we really need to be talking about, what kind of society do we want to live in where people are mentally healthy. And I think that's kind of the direction that we need to head and the conversations that we need to have.
And we also have to continue to have the conversations loudly and out in the open as well. I mean, even asking that question then, I felt nervous. Like the moment that we talk about suicide, I feel like, should I be asking this right now? Should we be having this conversation? And of course, it's so important because without that visibility, we can't be true. We can't have an honest conversation.
Exactly.
Paul, you mentioned in your Love Your Story that you thought you could tell your story by yourself, but you acknowledge that you learned that sometimes you just need a little help. I mean, like the Beatles said it, didn't they? We get by with a little help from my friends. Can you tell me about a couple of the major players who have swooped in and provided that little bit of help that you needed?
It's quite a long list now, but there's a few people that immediately come to mind, and the commonality across each of them is their willingness to listen, and their willingness to listen without judgment and without feeling like they need to prescribe some kind of solution. Some of the best conversations I've had have been, here's how I'm feeling, this is what I need. And then they say, okay, they don't need to be in my face trying to fix me, but I know that they're going to be there and to support me with whatever I think that I need. And, I've got a really good friend who's, back over in WA at the moment with all of the lockdowns, who I'll keep in touch with. And he's been a huge supportive part of that. I've had positive and negative experiences with bosses at work. But there's a couple of managers who just absolutely stand out for me when I was in, some of my darkest hours, and they were so supportive and realized that, the business isn't everything. The people are the business, and they were hugely helpful in that. And then I would also say most recently, my success coach at Torrens Uni was hugely helpful in helping me to navigate some of my demons and, help me to progress from my diploma into my degree. And now I'm working with my success coach as a student mentor. So it's, these people have played such an important role, and I'm so grateful.
If you feel comfortable, who is the success coach? It would be lovely to acknowledge them.
So my success coach who I've been working with for 2.5 years now, and the irony here, thinking about online study at the moment, is I've never actually met her. We've entirely had our relationship as a coaching thing online, and her name is Andrea Gonzalez, based here in Brisbane. So yeah, it's incredible to think that we've been working together so long and she's had such an impact, and we've never actually met face to face in person, which is pretty cool.
Now, you have told me a number of times that you're not confident really speaking in public, that you would rather not be, in the foyer of a building, at the opening of an event, in a conference. But, as I said, like right at the beginning, looks can sometimes be deceiving, and you are a powerful orator. And also, I feel your force, I feel your energy in a room when I'm with you. And I've also, I feel that connection just even today, just on this forum. You're now a speaker for Beyond Blue. You're also a student mentor with Torrens, and you're a regular guest speaker at university events. And now taking up this role of a student mentor, which I think is really critical, because one of the things we want to see at Torrens University, at Think Education, and at the Media Design School is greater connectivity between staff and students, that we become one community, and that also that student leadership absolutely thrives in the coming years. So to tell me a bit about this new role. So for someone who doesn't like the spotlight too much, you're suddenly in it in a major way. But obviously it's on your own terms. Why are you doing this, and why does it matter?
It matters because students need to know that they're not alone, and how they're feeling right now. There's ways that we can support them. So my role as a student mentor sees me, specifically, I work with a success coach team in undergraduate business and hospitality students. And in the 6 weeks that I've been in the role now, I've contacted and spoken with maybe 100, 150 students one-on-one. And it's been so eye-opening, being able to understand some of the challenges that they're facing in their lives at the moment, and also in adapting to online learning. And it's really cool for me to be able to connect my life experience and my passion for supporting people with their mental health, and being able to connect, I guess, the impact that my educational journey has had with these new students. And for me, it's really just joining all of the dots. Everything that I'm passionate about, now I can connect with these students one-on-one within an amazing team of coaches, who all share this, incredible vision for being able to support our students. So, I'm so stoked and so grateful to be able to, have this opportunity in such a challenging time.
Now, for me, if I was to be really honest, what we're doing between Torrens University Think Education and the Media Design School, it is a whole different approach to education. So you've talked about success coaches, like the small classrooms, the intimate campuses, the online experience. And, we get some things right, and we're still learning in other regards. And one of the things which I'm absolutely committed to is making sure we have a student experience that is second to none. But of course, it's about everybody contributing and us building this as well over time. So be honest with me right now, in terms of COVID-19 and this year, which has just been like no one could have anticipated it. What is the student experience right now, and what does it need to become?
Fantastic question, far out. So on my first day in this role, I remember contacting students, and I think I had 4 or 5 in a row who just spilled out their life story to me. And they'd lost jobs, or their partners had lost jobs. They're stranded here. They're feeling stressed. They've got family back home in their home country who are, potentially at risk. And obviously at the time there was, a lot of uncertainty about transport and how big this was going to get. How people navigated study during that study was, I guess, secondary to that because of these challenges. So that's one part of the experience. But the thing that really encourages me and really inspires me is how willing and how engaged students are with the resources that we're providing to them to help them through this process. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So only this week, I was in a workshop put on by the academic skills team on online learning. And we had a 76-year-old lady actually come to this session and wanting to learn some of the skills it takes to be an effective online learner.
So one of our students?
One of Torrens' students, yeah, which is just incredible. This is the first time she's ever studied online, and she was engaging with these online workshops. Unfortunately, she was running on dial-up still, so I think the connection was still a bit of a challenge. But, another example, the success coaches and I put on a workshop last night on how to manage group assignments online, which is another hugely, important topic for students. And we had a student tune in from Ecuador where it was 4 a.m. So the student in Ecuador at 4 a.m. had tuned into this workshop so that she could better understand how to manage a group assignment online. So I'm just so inspired by how students are engaging with the resources that we're providing to help them. And I think if we can continue doing that and continue being proactive and innovative in some of these resources we're creating for them, that's ultimately not only going to help with their study and employability goals, but it's going to help them a lot with their mental health during this time too.
Now, you have been making a podcast as well. So I want to take a moment. Let's have a listen to the podcast you recently produced.
Online learning in itself as a delivery platform has many kind of inbuilt lessons in its own. So whilst we're learning about different topics and learning different subjects, we're also learning about how do we collaborate with people online, how do we maintain that self-discipline, and how do we keep that schedule and that routine when it's all down to us.
So the other thing which I love, Paul, is you've been keeping active during this time. And it's not just been what you would usually expect. You've been staying active, running, doing yoga. And I want to have a quick look at something else that you've been recently up to, because this has motivated me a lot. Can we just quickly go to this video?
It is day 2 of the 2020 push-up challenge, raising funds and awareness for Headspace.
Okay, so
wow, I wasn't expecting to see that. That's awesome.
why all the push-ups?
So it's been challenging with all the gym closures, and physical exercise is a huge part of how I've been able to keep mentally healthy.
I want to say I did not want you to see below what you can see right now. This is not. I put my jeans on today, and this is not a good look.
It's it's being able to, for me, I saw this challenge come up online, raising funds and awareness for Headspace, which is the Youth National Health Foundation, National Mental Health Foundation. And this challenge was 3,046 push-ups in 21 days. And that's one push-up for each reported suicide in 2018. So this was an incredible initiative that I just couldn't miss, not only, to have some kind of exercise to do that was going to be motivating for me in lockdown and something that was accessible, but also something that was linked to such an important cause. And there were tens of thousands of people around Australia getting involved, and it was so great to feel a part of that community. And I know for my physical health and maybe keeping me in shape during lockdown, it helped, but also in having that challenge to do each day for my own mental health has been really, really powerful too.
So, Paul, I'm not going to do the push-ups, but I will, because it's not going to be a pleasant sight for anybody that I live with anyway. They're not going to enjoy that. But I will walk the steps, and I will commit to continuing to try and tell a better story about myself to myself.
Yeah.
And I will also take one other thing from this conversation, which is sometimes it is just, the simplest of exchanges. The fact that you talked about, it was those 4 days in hospital. You wouldn't think to yourself that it would be a nurse or, a doctor or someone, a cleaner, just one moment that, someone says something. And sometimes that's all it is. That's what we mean by connection. That's what we mean by care, and how important those things are. But, Paul, before we wrap up, there are going to be students watching this and staff members and community members who are going to be at different points of feeling shit. Okay.
Yeah.
And, if you could say one thing right now, or even, like one place where you would refer them to, like, what would be the one thing you'd say? Where is the one place you would refer them to?
The one place I would refer them to, and that I would encourage everyone to engage with, would be some of the resources available by Beyond Blue. I think it's our responsibility, everyone's responsibility, to really educate ourselves on, what to look for in others and ourselves. I think that's a really, really good place to start. And the second thing that I would want everyone to leave this conversation remembering is that this is a really challenging time. Life in general is really challenging. And I think the most important thing is really to be radically kind to ourselves. We're doing an amazing job in navigating life, and we need to give credit to ourselves for doing the best we can with what we've got. And being kind to ourselves through that process is so important, and not feeling like things need to be different. We are where we are, when we need to be for a reason, and that will become clear. If it's not clear now, it will become clear in time. So, be kind and be patient.
Paul, I'm going to say thank you so much for your honesty, your sincerity, your compassion, your willingness to actually lead the conversations that must be had. Please continue to be radically kind to yourself as well. And I'm hoping you can host one of these editions of the Racket moving forward. So be on standby. And hopefully you'll get a cool graphic as well when you host one of the next editions.
I'll get some cool glasses to try and challenge yours.
I was going to change them today, but there you go. So Paul Grainger, thank you so much. We'll come back to you later on.